Hey everyone, how are you doing? My name is Regalado, the founder of Route the Service Platform. It's a sales platform for the commercial cleaning services industry. I am also the owner of Rozalado Services, a family-owned commercial cleaning company. So welcome to Cleaning and Cocktails, a show where I get the opportunity to sit down with cleaning industry experts and share stories, talk shop about the industry. So grab your cocktail, listen in, and I hope you guys enjoy the show. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Cleaning and Cocktails. Post-COVID, in-person episode. As you can see, with some of the guys wearing some masks. You know, me and Mark have our masks. But first and foremost, welcome again, guys. Thank you. These are my Chicago guys. We call ourselves, what, the Four Horsemen, right? Before we even get into everything, right, the episode that we're going to touch on this whole time is going to be on numbers. But before we get into numbers, just tell me how it's been, guys, right? So we'll start with you. How has the last 3 to 4 months been with everything that's going on? Give us a little blue cleaning for the last couple months. And we'll take it from then go to Mark, then go to
changes, pivoting, restructuring, kind of looking at our overall operations, digging in deep into the numbers, which we'll talk about a little bit. Actually building a stronger culture, right? Especially now because we don't see each other as often as we did before. So everything, just all around, the entire process, just the entire culture, the entire knowing your numbers now. I think we talked about sometimes when you're doing so well that it hides some of those broken windows out there, right? Where you're bleeding some money, and when things are tight, like they are now, that comes to fruition. You start kind of pivoting and shifting, trying to make those changes. But overall, it's been, obviously the pandemic is not something we wish that happened, but on our end, it's really made us look a little deeper into our business.
Yeah, I mean, it's put the cleaning industry in the spotlight.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Mark, what about you?
It's been a good 3-4 months. It's been stressful for sure. We've grown, and it's not been without blood, sweat, and tears. We're figuring out new ways to disinfect accounts. We brought on 4 or 5 school districts, and we just started them all up in July. So we're really dealing with the administrators and seeing a different angle of things and how they're trying to open for their students, and they're working really hard, and we're doing everything we can to staff up and help them as well.
Nice. Juan, what about you?
I think it's been so busy that as you hear these guys say the last 3-4 months, when in reality it's 5 months and counting. So time is just flown by.
It's 5 months now.
And so I think that just gives you an idea of how fast things have been moving, right? So I think things have just been moving tremendously fast for us. And with that said, I think a lot of times as business owners we try to be on top of everything, and because things were happening so fast, so many moving pieces all at once. The nice thing for us is I was able to see that my staff, my key staff was able to just pick things up fast and just get things done because they couldn't wait around for my answers. And so they became a lot more independent in the process, and kind of just allowed me to start to kind of pull back even more, right? So obviously because of the pandemic, I couldn't just pull back because it's so important. But it allowed me to focus on learning new processes, putting in new things in place, and they were just, taking care of everything. So
yeah.
It's but honestly, going back to the other episodes, it's the technology that we have from CRM and automation, everything that we have that has allowed us to do so much and catch up so fast.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that we would be able to do what we've done if we didn't have all those things already in place. The other thing is I always try to operate with a little bit more slack. And even going into this, I was already creating more slack for future growth. And so thank God we did, because same thing, if I didn't have that slack, there's no way we would have been able to get through this the way we did. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's times like this that the books open up, you peel back the onions and the layers of your organization, right?
You always want to plan for growth, so you always want to have additional staff, because if you're having to catch up to the growth, you're in such a bad spot.
Oh, terrible spot. So it's again, I want to dig deep into numbers, right? Because and the reason why I picked numbers as the topic today, you guys, is as I'm sure you see one in a lot of these Facebook groups, right? Is the small to medium-sized business owner, more predominantly the mom and pop and the small business, they're so quick to want to know, how do you price this, how do you win this job, how do you get new business, right? Where if you don't know your numbers first, who cares about new business, right? Like, you could win new business that could be detrimental to your business, to your company and your home, where not all new business is good business, right? So I wanted to dig deep on numbers itself, because I feel like it's a big topic that, you know, as me and you were talking, Saul, was you almost feel super confident when you know, your numbers is for your business. There is no one number for everybody, right? Everybody's different, everybody operates differently. So first and foremost, like, let's talk about, at this moment, you guys could say you've started to realize what was a good vertical and a bad vertical of business that you were doing, right? So let's talk about restaurants, hospitality. If you had all your eggs in one basket with that, how do you guys feel like you would be as a business owner right now?
In trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, we've never done really restaurants at all, food service joints, anything like that. So I don't have the background in that at all.
But even not just restaurants, but those verticals where you had all your eggs in that one basket. Like, have you learned by this, you know, guys, to diversify your clientele? Am I right?
For us, yes. We do have restaurants, and luckily for us, I would say the majority, close to all of them return. Not to the scale that we were before, but obviously these are the connections and relationships we've had since we began, 6-7 years ago. But you're right. I mean, for us, it's really, it's almost like good and bad, right? So you don't kind of want to stretch yourself out too much, doing too many projects or too many services. For us, we had to condense actually the amount of services we had too. So for us to really scale, is we're focusing on certain areas that we know we're good at. Like they say, you don't want to drown into all the opportunities, because all opportunities are not equal. So we're focusing on is more on condensing services, being great at what we're doing, and then you can flourish after that. And kind of restructuring, like I talked earlier today, is we're focusing on various services, various clientele, and then from there, start venturing out and more firms.
What about you?
You know, honestly, we were lucky because we were primarily doing commercial facilities, office spaces, things like that. So mostly owner-occupied spaces too. So we're not really going after third-party managed companies. And I feel like so basically spaces that we were in, instead of people downsizing, they were adding day porter service, increasing disinfectant service, doubling up staff in certain aspects. Especially in the manufacturing sector, obviously a lot of them were pivoting to providing, you know, PPE of some way, shape, or form. So, you know, lucky for us, we were pretty lucky. So, you know, we have some, you know, senior centers, some medical facilities. We don't really do any retail or restaurants. That's never really been a vertical for us. I think in the past, our pricing model just doesn't work for that. And so I just stayed away from that. And, you know, in this case, it happened to be lucky. But, you know, we have a mix of clients, so that also helps, you know what I mean? So.
Okay. So now let's talk numbers, right? So let's talk about, without, you know, again, we don't have to reveal everything, right? But there's simple formulas and there's simple categories of what you should account for in providing a quote in a bid and what's included, right? So first and foremost, like, do you guys price hourly charge, or do you do cents per square feet? Let's talk janitorial first. So, like, Mark, I know you're in bigger spaces, so I got a feeling you're probably cents per square feet. But, like, again, for the viewers that, you know, get questions, how do I bid? How do I price? What's good? What's bad?
Sure.
Like, let's try to break this down a little bit.
Okay. So I think the first thing to understand is cents per square foot and number of hours can help you and hurt you in different situations. So if you have a very large facility, okay, your cents per square foot is always going to be the way that you go. If you have a very, let's call it a 10,000 square foot or under facility, if you're quoting that facility at cents per square foot, you're never going to make any money, because your cents per square foot is not going to equate to the number of hours you actually need to do that facility. One example I always throw out there is daycares. Daycares are normally a 10,000 to 12,000 square foot footprint.
It's so much work.
But if you quote it anywhere less than 8 to 10 hours a night, which they're going to look at you and the price is probably not going to be right for them, and for us, that's okay because we don't want them,
Yeah.
you're never going to make any money.
Yeah.
And you're just going to get beat up over service requests.
Okay. Because cents per square feet, there's nothing in there for expectations.
Now, I take 1 million square feet of school district, okay, and you're at, 10 cents a square foot, well, now you got some
Yeah.
a month. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
So what about you?
So we do, it's different because we're so project-based, right? Post-construction, cleanup, very detailed cleaning. So kind of going off Mark's point is that, and I think we talked about this too, is you really have to gauge your business and what exactly, it's almost like a time study, right? You got to gauge exactly how much square footage your people are doing per hour. For us, for post-construction deep cleanings, whether it's commercial, residential, you got to come up with that number to ensure an accurate quote, right? There's, like you said, there's no perfect medium. Formula.
Yeah,
So
right.
you kind of really have to find out what's good for you. For us, again, project-based, and then off that square footage, whatever that rate is, right, per square foot per hour, then we give the rates.
You bring up a good point, and I'm sure you guys can attest to this. ISSA says that 5,000 square feet an hour is like a normal rate, right?
No,
Is
not
the
for me.
average.
No,
It's
not for me.
the average, right? That's what they're saying. That's what they're putting out there. But if you go into a daycare and you clean 5,000 square feet an hour, what are you going to be in a 10,000 square foot facility for 2 hours?
And that's how, like, you take a 3,000 square foot restaurant,
Yeah.
there's no comparison.
You
So
can't.
That's why those are
So
tough.
how does it compare to in the restaurant? Because I don't know how it works for the restaurant industry. How
I
does
mean,
it work?
I literally do hourly, right? So
Okay.
I stick an hour to it. So I guess it's almost like a catch-22, because in the beginning, it's gonna be tough for you. You're probably gonna lose, in all honesty. You're gonna lose in the first couple of restaurants, because you've gotta understand your
Until you
production
figure
rate.
it out.
You figure it out. Now,
Right.
when we price restaurants, or, not daycare so much, but stuff that
Right.
it's detail-oriented and it's just a lot of foot traffic coming in,
Mm-hmm.
we reference accounts. All. That's like that one, 10,000 square
Okay,
feet.
so you're
They've got 4
benchmarking.
bathrooms.
Okay.
We're benchmarking.
Okay.
So it's really a benchmark.
That's a good way to do it.
To then truly understand, if that team can do it, how do we train that team? We've got to train this team to do it, or else you're not going to be competitive. You're not going to win business, right? But, I mean, Juan, you're a numbers guy, right? So it's like, cents per square feet, though, also could be determined by our hourly rate. It goes both ways, right? Like, how do you get to a lump sum monthly service charge? Even if you're doing it cents per square feet, you still have an hourly rate that you still can attribute that to, right? So how do you, I mean, you're doing a lot of luxury high-rise buildings, right, and commercial properties. Do you even look at hourly, or do you have a certain benchmark hourly rate you charge?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're mostly, I'm always looking at production. It's really the biggest thing, right? So going back to daycare, right? Like, production is going to be in daycare. It might be 2,000 square feet. It might even be as low as 1,000, So kind of like what Mark said, we're talking probably 7 to 10 hours, for a 10,000 square foot facility.
I think the expectation of the customer comes into play big time too, because if a customer's picky versus not picky in a daycare, they're going to
You're
be
throwing
looking
another
for
hour or
average.
two.
And so that's why, again, I'm looking at production. I'm trying to see what does this customer want, because there's a lot of daycares where, the administration might say, no, the teachers and the staff are responsible for taking care of toys, taking care of X amount of things. But then you might have another facility where the administration is like, no, you handle everything, right?
That's what we have you for. Right?
That's what we have you for, and so, that's two different quotes, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, I'd hate to say that, there's not a cookie cutter way to do it, but there is standards, right? There's standards like anything, right? So like Mark said, you're gonna have standard for, price per square foot. So, you might have an office space that's 10 cents a square foot, 11 cents a square foot. Again, there's assumptions, right? That's assuming 5 days a week, office space, And when you're looking at these numbers, you're usually talking about bigger spaces. You know, for those numbers to really come into play, you probably have to look at, you know, 40, 50,000 square feet and above. Anything under that, then those numbers start to get a little cloudy, right?
Yeah.
And then you're all, obviously you have to look at your the geography, right? So in Chicago, we're going to be at $15 an hour. We've got Cook County, so we have mandatory sick pay. We've got, you know, Obamacare. So we have all these additional things that add costs, right? So it's just, you know, it's a different ballpark versus, you know, I know a lot of states are still paying $9 an hour, $9.50 an hour. So, you know, when we're talking about our hourly rate, they might look at us like we're crazy, but it's just, you know, our wages are 50% higher than theirs.
Yeah.
So plus we have more regulatory things to deal with, like mandatory sick pay that other states or counties or whatever might not have. So all those things come into play.
Digging further into costs, like what, you know, this is a very long-winded question, right? But what are the, if you had to say your biggest bullet points, main takeaways on what's included in your cost? What, Mark, you know, give me one, Saul, give me one, Juan, give me one, and we could all together wrap up. But what are the things a small business owner starting into the business needs to know and account for in cost?
I mean, I think the easiest one is just your labor. You know, everybody knows that 50 to 60% of this is labor. So you've got to have your hours and your workloading right before you go into something. And don't be afraid to turn something down. That's what's important. You know, if someone says they have a budget for X and you're over by X amount, say, hey, this is what it's going to take, and stand by your word, because you're either gonna get the account and you're gonna learn why you needed that extra, or you're gonna walk away and you're still gonna know, but you're not gonna be putting money up to get there.
So, I mean, you said 50 to 60. Like, do you guys have, like, this is again something that could vary between you being a 5-man employee company to a 100-employee company. What is there a good range you could give the audience on 55%, 60%, 62%? Is there a range you guys feel comfortable saying, you know, labor costs are?
Of labor?
Yeah.
I mean, of sales. Though.
Yeah. Let's say it's a $2,500 contract a month, right? 60% of that usually is going to go to labor.
I mean, I think you could bet on something like that.
Okay. Because I was going to say I'm 60 to 65. It's really where I put my number in. What about you guys?
I mean, for us on a project basis, well, again, we're going project basis. With labor, it's roughly around that, usually 50, 60%. But then we got to put in, obviously, the fuel that's involved, obviously, supplies and so forth. There's just so much more involved for us going out to these projects and so forth. And you got to take into account, too, I mean, this is more on the market side, but there's always got to be that plus-minus percentage where it might be an uptick, right? You might stay there a little longer and so forth. But usually around that 50, 60% is kind of where we're at.
Juan, does that sound?
I mean, it's about right. Honestly, for us, it'll vary a little bit because if we have a really large account where we have 10 employees or something like that, obviously we squeeze that margin. So obviously we're going to have whatever, more of that total price is going to be labor, right? So some of these bigger accounts, you have to squeeze your margins in order to win them. So,
I mean, on top of labor, though, so you said a few, right? Fuel. So project, it's a good, like, it's, you got janitorial and you got project, right? Project, you tend to make a little bit more margins on special projects, right? But if it were janitorial, you know, other things you got to consist of. Like you guys, I'm sure you heard the word fringe cost, right? Like adding FICA, adding workman's comp, adding health insurance.
Well, it's cost of labor. I mean, you have labor, cost
So
of
there's got
labor.
labor, and then on top of that,
So, I mean,
anything-
your dry labor is what it is, and then you have cost of labor, which is taxes, insurance.
To employee hour cost, yeah. I mean, yeah.
So you call it dry labor. That's something new. Okay.
No,
like
not
that.
dry labor. I'm just saying,
What about you?
labor itself, and then you have,
On top,
you know, the cost of this.
And you get a little wet.
Yeah, so I like that. We're kicking another one. So it's like those are the things that I tend to see people forget about is, you know, what your FICA is going to be depending on the city. Your health insurance, if it's an employee, you know, Juan, you got a lot of people working full time on accounts. Like you've got to account for these things.
Yep.
That's why it's like if you're adding all these elements to the price, you finally get to a point that you feel comfortable. Like, hey.
Well, I mean, let's not forget about supplies and equipment and what it takes to do the job too. And you know, a lot of people, that can vary. So
that's a good one, because I do want to
So-
get your guys' take on supplies and equipment. So keep going.
Juan gets huge accounts, right? So his supply cost, if he's doing a percentage, let's say he gets $1 million account, right? And let's say his normal percentage that he's gonna attribute to supplies is gonna be, let's say 20%, right? For that $1 million account, he's probably not gonna go with that 20%.
Yeah.
So the bigger the account is based on the labor, you really have to look at the percentage you're attributing to your equipment and supplies and trim that down. You really need to do your homework to see what is it actually going to take in the account to perform, as opposed to here's my general percentage. Because you could win or lose the account that way. That's right.
So what about you? So I like your project-based approach to like keep going with that as far as supplies and equipment is big on projects. I mean, you're bringing in a lot of things for some of the work.
So that's, so it's like they say, we talked about this earlier, is we focus really hard on what that gross profit is going to be, right? The cost of goods sold. What's that going to take to get the job done? Because we don't really, sometimes we tend to look at the net, for the most part, but we tend to really gravitate towards that number, and then that kind of paints the story as far as where we want our net margin to be. So we definitely take into account supplies, percentages, obviously our true cost per hour for labor, and then any equipment, fuel, and so forth. So we've got basically our program spreadsheets and what we do and how we calculate these numbers. Obviously everybody's got different tools, but for us, that's really what's the cost? What's our cost going to be, right? And that's kind of we build up.
It's important to use, it's important to use a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
You need to track that stuff. I mean, we've talked about it before, that you got to know where you stand, so that you can plug a number in and say, okay, I got this is my labor, this is my burden of labor, this is supplies, equipment, and everything else that goes along with it, and just plug and chug. It's automatic.
So let's Juan, let's talk about. So let's say it's a 10,000 square foot facility. You've got one person working 5 hours a day, but you need. So what does it come? What's the point that you start calculating the vacuum, the mop bucket, the janitor cart, or a floor scrubber? Like, are you do you guys?
How many days a week?
Do you include everything into that supply equipment percentage? Because I like what you said, and sometimes it could be 20.
It can be blown.
I know sometimes I come in at 3%.
Exactly.
So like, what are you passing on all that cost to the client? Are you ever doing? It's a part of operating a business.
No, so everything for us is account based, right? And the reason I say it's account based because you don't ever want to be in a situation where you lose 10% of your business, for example, and now you've got all this overhead, and now you're potentially losing money as a business, right? So everything has to be, if an account goes, everything that's tied to that cost-wise goes.
I agree with you.
You know what I mean? So
it's got to roll up to it.
So for example, one of the girls that works with us is, she's dropping off a bid probably around right now for accounting, right? So for that, I have a dedicated area manager, dedicated account manager, it's going to have a dedicated projects team, everything. So all those people, management team, if, for example, I don't have that account, well then...
You wouldn't have that team.
I wouldn't have that team, right? So, and obviously if we were to win it, obviously I'd have to put that together, right? It's almost like a mini company, but in this case, just to give, you guys a reference, is the current company that has it, they're charging right around $2 million a year. So we came in at 1.7 million. And that's the thing, right? Is like, you have to have your pricing model. So like, I know what my pricing should be, right? So my pricing on this account could probably be even tighter, but then again, they're coming in at 2 million. So why would I, come in at say 1.5? Because then the people reviewing it might say, well, you're way too low, and then they could throw my bid out, right? So with that said, I'd say sometimes there's always two bids, right? There are two prices for an account. There's the price that you've determined from your benchmarking that it should be, and then there's a price that's going to take to win the account. And you really have to have that in mind. For example, we have another account that we just won recently where, I was assigning, I think it was 6 hours to the account, and their budget really only allowed for about 4.5. And so they said, unless you can be here at this price, we can't
Can't
win
win
business.
your
But I looked at it and so I was like, okay, well, do you have a current scope of work? So they sent me their scope of work. Well, their scope of work was very limited. So I said, okay, well, for that scope of work, I could do it in 4.5 hours. So I reworked my bid and I did it 4.5, and we won the business. We started on the first.
You got to dissect the scope where there's no general scope for everybody.
And so
where you could
with
be
that
more
said,
productive.
right? And with that said, right, that's why there really isn't a cookie cutter price, because that was my price off of my standard production rates, off of everything that we know to be true. But the reality is that the current scope that they were getting was a lot more limited than what we were offering. Therefore, I was able to rework my price and get to the price that they needed to be at. So that's why I say that there really is always two prices: is the price that it should be based off of your benchmarks, and then the price that's going to take to win the account, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be higher or lower. So I'd say the best advice I can give someone is always find out what they're currently paying, or what their current budget is, or what their expectations are, right? I'd say 80% of the time they'll tell you, 20% of the time they'll tell you to, go away, or they can't disclose or whatever. But 80% is a pretty good number.
So do you guys, so there's a question I always get too is, Rick, is there a standard? Is there a basis? Is there something companies or people like us can come up with, which I know everybody probably has here, is a standard spreadsheet where you can plug in the square feet, plug in the days of the week, and get something that spits out, here's an attempt or an average of what the price may be without even seeing the space or knowing the scope to get started. Like, what do you guys feel about that approach? Will it ever get autonomous where you could plug and play?
I think for me it's square footage, right? So I do have square footages. So I'll say for a facility that's 50,000 square feet and above, mostly carpeted, it's X, whatever. Let's say 12 cents a square foot. If it's under 20,000 square feet, then it's 13 cents a square foot. If it's under 10,000 square feet, then it's 15 cents a square foot. Whatever, right? Like But I also have to know whether it's carpeted or whether it's So the main things I need to know is size, number of employees, floor type.
So this
That gives me my density levels. That gives me the floor type. That gives me the square footage.
Number of employees gives you density.
And I can pretty closely figure out a price for that facility over the phone.
Okay.
Just with that data. You know what I mean? So
Because I feel like that's where I want, we got to think of, technology for the future as far as we've got to get to a point where we can create those standards, or else you're going to get stuck working in the business.
That's the traditional office spaces. Right now, if I've got a facility that's educational, that's a different ballpark. There's a slightly different price per square foot.
So locations are, again,
Right.
also
It's a
that.
medical facility, it's a little bit different. Daycares, I don't know because I don't deal with them. I imagine that again, that production's got to be something between 1,000 and 2,000 square feet, right? So, but yeah, I can figure that out, right? But then again, from there, you still have to do your walkthrough. You have to figure out, is what they're asking outside of your traditional scope of work, so you have to figure that out, right? Like,
So it's a good starting point to build some kind of standard with your company. Because again, we've all scaled and we're all growing, but we all got there because you guys would all probably agree, you have help in pricing. You have help with bidding. Others are involved. It's not just us solely doing it. Where I think if you're going to grow and scale, which knowing your numbers helps you grow and scale, you've got to create some kind of baseline as a company.
I mean, it all starts with square footage and density. That's it. Because once you plug those hours in, right, and you have, let's say, your 50,000 square feet, and you come up with whatever that calculates for you. Once you get down to your bottom number, and let's say you're 50,000 square feet, so you're 10,000 a month, let's say, you're going to take your 10,000 a month divided by your 50,000 square feet, and that's your square foot price. So now, as you go up and down in hours, your square foot price is changing.
Yeah.
So it's all determinant on that square footage to start.
Okay.
You've got to see the space, and you've got to know the expectation.
Okay.
For project-based, same thing, right? Standard square footage. But post-construction, they might ask you for 3 phases, right? 2 phases.
Oh, yeah.
I need a trash
Three-phase
truck.
clean.
Give me a 50 cubic yard truck. I need about 5 of them and stuff. So for us, it's great if it's just a white glove type, dusting, fixing, cleaning. It's a standard price. Obviously, if they want, trash removal or any heavy other lifting, at that point, that's how we.
Well, I think 1.2 Saul, right, is on post-construction, people got to be understanding of change orders, right? They got to treat it like a trade where you're going to be requested to probably come back, do more, so that price can't be an all-in. You got to have an asterisk to say, if you call me back.
You need to protect yourself.
You got to protect
Absolutely.
yourself.
You have to, and at the same time, that's why it's very important to communicate with that client or contractors in this case, is that there's got to be a hard stop at some point, right? You can't, I'm not going to be changing orders.
Or it's got to convert to monthly cleaning.
Exactly. Something's got to happen.
You want me here every day, I'll come every day.
Exactly. So once you have that, and I think because you do it as well, is that I think there's got to be more education. Because I think there's a lot of companies out there that might just go, all right, let's just go with this bid, and that's it.
I know, and there's a lot of them.
No, there's a lot.
Right?
There's
And
a
so
lot.
the client, for us, obviously we'll lose, but for me, I know exactly what's going to happen because we've been doing it for a while, right? And so I think a lot of that has got to happen.
That's what I
with
feel
a lot
like.
of these
I feel like you
service
throw them
companies.
off when you say change orders. Like, oh, you're a cleaning company. Hold on, you guys don't do change orders. That's for plumbers and electricians. No, man.
What a hard stop.
We're a trade service too. We're one of the trades. We may be the last trade that comes in. But like, if you don't, that's why post-construction, it's a competitive market.
And you'll bleed real
Yeah, you'll
quick,
bleed.
man. You'll gush. Yeah.
Oh, dude, you really want to know my stories. I got some bad stories. So now let's talk the last piece of cost, overhead operating costs, right? As far as, this is a topic where if you are a mom and pop and you're 5 employees, 6, 7, 8 employees, yours is going to be different than ours, right? And then mine might be different than Mark's might be different than Saul, Juan, and so on. But I know when I first started, I just had this number of 10% in the beginning. I was like, oh, my operating cost is 10%. That's drastically changed, but what do you guys consider as far as overhead, some kind of a range of percentage? Do you guys have anything that you plug in? I know it could be account-based, right? But is there a percentage that the audience and the small business owner trying to get into the industry or grow should account for? Because again, what does this do, guys? And I know, people might say, Rick, man, you guys are talking deep into numbers. This brings the bottom line up for our industry. If people start pricing the right way, the industry is going to reward. It's going to be rewarded for us.
I think it's important to address indirect versus direct, right? So if you have like a beautiful big building and you spend all kinds of money on that building, but that's not going to necessarily be tied directly to your jobs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it really depends on what you're figuring as direct, what you're figuring as indirect.
What are you trying to say? I bought 2 nights in the office?
Are you saying you got a nice office?
Cool.
So, but you said it changed big time, right?
Yeah.
So like from the first office you were in to the office you're in now, you're not paying the same amount of money. Exactly. So the percentage changes based on how we spend. And I think as we're coming up, that's important. We could go out and, you can spend money on whatever you want, but it is going to affect your company and the way that you operate on a regular basis. So if you keep your expenditures low and lean while you're trying to grow, then your overhead is going to stay low, and you could, like you have, reinvested back in the company and reinvest in people and equipment and things like that. But if you're out there, you're buying the newest car, you're doing the new, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Well, then your overhead's going to skyrocket.
True.
Yeah, so, I think we got to give people something concrete, right? And so, I would say the things that you have to account for primarily, right, are obviously your labor. Then from there you have your taxes. So you have to figure out specifically what taxes you have to pay for and what those rates are, right? So it's FICA, then FUTA, SUTA. Then you have, and then on your SUTA rate, which is your state unemployment tax rate, that's also going to vary based on, how many unemployment claims you have, right? So you have to manage that rate because, someone, one guy could be paying 2%, the other guy could be paying 10%. That's an 8% difference.
Man.
And in many accounts, that's your profit margin.
Very true.
So, that guy could be profitable on the account that you would break even if you don't manage that the right way. So, so then the other expense you have to manage is, general liability, Obviously, you have to have an umbrella. You don't have to, but when you work with bigger accounts, you definitely need it. And then you have your workman's comp. And the workman's comp is the same thing, right? I mean, that rate can vary between 4 upwards of 10, 12 to 15%, you know. Same thing, right? Same thing applies to SUTA. Unless you're managing that really tightly, you're gonna, you know, that could be the difference between you breaking even and the guy next to you making 10% or whatever, right? So those are the expenses you have to account for as it comes to direct labor. Here, where we operate, we still have to, you know, we also have to account for the Cook County sick pay policy. If you have to cover health insurance because you're a full-timer, so ACA coverage or whatever else you offer. And then if you're offering, you know, any vacation time, if you're offering, you know, 5 days, whatever it might be for vacation time, you have to account for that as well. And if you're offering 401k with match or whatever, so whatever other perks you're offering, that still gets tied into your labor, right? And to me, that still is direct labor because that helps you with retention. You know, so I see that as direct labor tied to the account. Why? Because at the end of the day, it is part of the total compensation for that given employee, right? Yeah. So I do those at, you know, on an account level and an employee level, right? So that's my direct labor costs, right? Then at the account, I'm looking at how much supervision am I going to need for this account, right? So am I going to need 1 employee, 2 employees, 3 employees? And so for every employee, I have to account for ID badges, uniforms, a set of equipment, so that's vacuum, trash can, whatever they're going to need, right? Because that all stays at the account. So if I have 2 employees, then I have to have 2 sets of those things, right? So it all depends on the amount of employees. So you have to account for that. Squeegee, you know, cleaning chemicals, obviously consumables, those, you know, the client pays for, right? So those are all the things you have to factor in. And if you're using, you know, route or something similar to route, all those numbers you can set as defaults already, and they're always going to be there for you because those numbers are never going to change.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, unless your unemployment rate goes up or your workers' comp rate, then you go in and change it. But you can notify when that changes anyway. So those are, I think, you know, for the audience, the main things you always have to account for. You know, direct supervision, I account for, okay, this account's going to require, you know, 5 hours every week of supervision, or if it's a bigger account, obviously, you know, every day someone's got to go in there, whatever, right? Like you figure it out based on the account size.
I gotta say, Juan did his homework. He came to the table with a lot of bullet points. Where were you guys at?
But I think what Juan brings to the table is really good because it ties into something that's bigger than this even, and that's your monthly P&L. You have to look at a P&L for each account every month. There's labor.
I never used to look at it per account.
Every month, you have to be looking at a P&L of every account that you have because as you grow and you get bigger, you have these smaller accounts that could be eating you alive.
Suck you dry.
So it's very important that as you know, as you move up in the company and as your companies move up and as you're just starting out, you need to be in tune with what your numbers are, and you need to look at those numbers every month.
Yeah, and so going back to the account level, if in that account I'm going to put in an auto scrubber, I'm going to put in, you know, battery backpack, specialty equipment that's going to cost me a lot more than my traditional expenses, you know, then I account for that in there as well, right?
So do you account for that on here's the total cost, divide by the amount, or the frequency of the contract? How does somebody put a $5,000 floor scrubber into a contract?
So I usually divide it by 2.5 years, because usually you have about 3-year useful life, but then the other half a years because it's going to be maintenance, batteries, whatever it might be, right? Okay. So I figure 2.5, you know, so if it's 10,000, then I'm adding, you know, 10, or if it's a $5,000 machine divided by 2.5.
Okay.
So.
And that's something small, but so big where that matters.
Yeah, but that goes directly into the account, right?
Yeah,
and so with that said, you know, for example, like I've said before, I won't do a 1-year agreement.
Exactly.
Because then I'll get sacked with that if they leave before that.
All right, so
and if you put the full,
you go after the accounts he says no to for 1 year.
Well, you know, and that's okay because when you take it, you're gonna come in, you're gonna do deep clean for 3 months, and then they're gonna go to the next guy, and you're gonna do all that work for nothing.
True. No, that's why it's like 1 year contracts.
Right.
They sound great, but it's like, man, it's not really a commitment because then That's why I hate the RFP process. It's like you're gonna go back over and over.
And that's
every year.
There's no consistency. You got to bid. It just that's probably why we haven't gotten into it so much. But
Yeah.
it's good to hear.
And honestly, the biggest thing
is
for me that I found is that, the people that, the good accounts, or the good relationships, they actually want a longer term because
they
they
don't
see,
wanna do the RFP process.
they know that it's an investment into their facility. They're investing time into you. You're investing time back, and they want to see that, right? And so, they want to make sure that you're not going to walk out, because even if you bid it badly, they want to make sure you're not just going to walk away. And that's the thing, right? Is you have to figure out a way to make it work. So,
I think as part of the sales process, it's important to, as an owner, as a salesperson, whatever your role is in the company, if you're selling an account and you're seeing that these people don't recognize that hey, we got some skin in the game too, might not be the right account.
So one thing, touching on this 2-year contract, right, is,
I usually try to do 3.
so 2 to 3 year
Yeah,
contract.
depends on the
Do you
investment.
guys, in the verbiage, because this is something probably, again, the audience should know this, right, is, do you have any kind of clause of, in year 2, it will go up 2.5%, 3%, 4%? Like, do you have the escalating percentage?
Well, I mean,
Or are you giving them a good deal to get a 2-year contract?
well, no, I mean,
What's the give and take? Is there any?
In today, I don't know about, you're in the city, you can't do that.
Yeah,
You just, you
our
can't,
costs are going up.
you can't
Right, exactly,
hold,
right.
if you're holding firm, you can't. You can't, there has to be an escalator, because minimum wage is gonna go up, everything's gonna go up.
They know that.
Yeah.
right, they know that because, for example, it's been going up $1 a year, but then in addition to that, it's still going to go up at the inflation rate. So you at least have to put in there, an inflation adjustment. And honestly, clients understand how small. Obviously, if you're trying to, raise them 10%, they're going to say,
Yeah.
they're.
But so, I mean,
it
2.5%,
has to be small,
is that a good?
It has to make sense, right? So, so then, so those are the direct costs that you want for the account, right? Like I said, uniforms, badges, all that stuff, right? You're not going to account for your office overhead, your marketing expenses, your sales, none of that. That stuff doesn't matter to that account, right? You can't route from Peter to pay Paul. Like I'll give you an example. I mean, this year I've probably spent easily $100,000 in disinfecting equipment. I don't associate that to any account because
When you're pricing a job.
That's almost like, that's your new service.
that's a whole new
It's a whole new
business.
service.
That's almost a whole new division. So like, that I don't associate that to any account, right? So I can't account that as overhead.
It's
Doesn't
just
make any
investment.
sense. Right.
I mean, it's gonna pay itself off.
Yeah, correct.
I'm
Exactly.
sure you made more than that already.
Exactly. So, and so like Mark was saying, right, like if you have, all these luxuries or things that are unneeded, then, that's affecting your overhead in ways that don't make sense, right? You want to do things that make sense and add value to the client.
Right.
And so now that we move into overhead, now once you're in overhead, you have to look at your marketing, you have to look at, the cost of sales, the cost of putting those proposals, your office.
What does it take to run that business that you're bringing in?
Exactly.
So would
Your
you guys say-
office, your accounting, your billing, all those things now, that becomes your overhead. So whatever that number is, your vehicles, for your projects teams and all that stuff is now your overhead number. That, to me, that's why I look at it. That's not associated directly to the account, right? So, like you might have a vice president or whatever, right? But so that's your overhead number. And I like to look at it completely separate because for me, I need to keep that number as low as possible. I think it's our duty to keep those numbers as low as possible because that's how we add value to the client.
You could do different things for the client, and
If your number's low.
then as you push, I mean, it's just
Because in all honesty, I've seen that effect.
it's just a
where
scale.
I tried to pass it on to the client, and it was
Yeah.
Either
was
you
not
don't
good.
win
It was not good, right? So it's like, I know for me, because the topic of people, right? I feel like people are our biggest assets,
Sure.
right? Like people want to talk about growth. You're not growing if you don't have the right people. But I don't care how good you think you are, right? Like you need the right people in place. Now, and you always get the question of, well, when can I hire a supervisor? When can I hire somebody to do this, to do that? It comes with how profitable you are and how low and lean you can operate, right?
Yeah, so we
Go ahead.
talked about, just jump in, because you guys are doing great with the big facility. So on our end, we talked about this briefly, is we've brought on a platform called Divvy.
Yes.
For that same reason, is that, we want to make sure that our overhead cost is very manageable. right? And our operating costs as well. So what this platform does is that you can create different budgets and you can put a cap. So it's basically a line of credit, and you can have virtual credit cards or credit cards to your managers, setting budgets for each one. If you're outsourcing any work, you can set budgets for them as well, whether it's HR, accounting, whatever it is. So that way, you know how it is. Sometimes these subscription models, they'll jump 10% and you don't even know it, right? So 10% here, 5% there, 7% there. You know, is quite a bit of money for a company our size. Yeah, so it counts. So now we've been able to kind of manage all this, and now actually know where, you know, kind of like once you have your gross profit, okay, where is that overhead? What are your operating expenses, and how can you make that net margin much bigger? So now setting those budgets where people can't overcharge or our guys swiping more where they're at the fuel pump has just created tremendous changes for our system. So
we'll make sure we add that to the channel. What it's called, Divvy.
It's called Divvy. Yeah. So you guys, great points. For us to manage that, we use that platform to ensure.
What about you got Juan? You got anything that you use on budgeting or expenses?
No, I mean, honestly, I look at everything at account level, and then beyond that, it's, you know, it's our overhead, and we just try to manage that total number. And I do review, like, I'll review, like, what our ad spend is, I'll review our subscriptions, you know, like, what subscriptions do I need, which ones can I save money on, or, you know, things like that, right? So, you know, but going back to the account level and the supply stuff that we're talking about, right? It's good to have a benchmark. Say, I know the benchmark for cleaning chemicals is usually like 2% or 3%. 2-3% is the benchmark, but it varies, right? And so, and that's why you really have to look at, you know, everything like a bean count, right? And so, you know, I had an account, for example, where, you know, and Saul mentioned this too, right? And we were just talking about this yesterday, actually. You know, where my core chemical cost was, I want to say about $400 a month. So it's pretty high because we're in there
5-6 days a week.
We're in there. That account specifically, we're doing 7 days a week, and we hit those floors several times a day. It's 24/7 basically. And so one of the things I did is I put in a tenant's machine that uses the ECO water technology. So the water has a charge.
Water.
And
There's no chemical.
That's the chemical.
Yeah.
And so now I cut out about $400 a month in cleaning solution, and it's greener. So, you know, I'm helping the environment and helping helping the green environment and helping the green in my pocket.
That's one of those tips, right? Where people think, hey, you won the account. It may not be the price you wanted to win the account at, but now you've got the business, right? So now go back to the drawing board, get productive, get a machine, get a scrubber, retune it, like fix your process.
And that's exactly it, right? Like, you know, that's why I say production rate is very important.
Key.
And then beyond that, again, there's always two prices. There's a price that you're benchmarked, and then there's a price that they're paying or that you need to be at or whatever, right? And that's why it's important to know what your competition is doing in your market, so finding out what they're currently paying. Because a lot of times it might be that maybe you need to fix your production rate. Yeah. Maybe you need to fix something in your, you know, it's not your pricing that's off, it's what you're doing, right?
Retrain your staff.
Exactly. So, you know, I would say the only time that doesn't apply is if you're bidding against a franchise. If you're bidding against a franchise, always bid higher, but give them a real clean. You know, and that's one thing where I'd say it actually changes. I won't meet their price. I'll always go higher.
But now you're selling the scope.
Because now I know that if it's a franchise model, obviously you can tell walking in, but usually the clean is really bad.
Yeah.
And so they're already expecting you, you know, to give them a higher price, but give them true cleaning.
Realistic
right?
price. Yeah.
I would say that's probably the only caveat to what I said.
So to end this phenomenal discussion here, right, is the last bit or piece I think people should know about or get a good idea is markup, net margin, profit margin, whatever you want to call these different variables, right? What do you guys, you know, again, it doesn't have to be an exact number, but give me a range of what you think, because everything's case by case per business, right? Again, based on overhead costs, based on many variables. What should people shoot for if they want to grow their business, right? What's a good profit margin percentage range? On you, let's go.
It varies by account. It really does, because
if you're gonna bid school districts at 35%, you ain't gonna win them. Doesn't matter, you ain't gonna win them.
Okay.
Now, if you're gonna take that same 35% and put it onto a project,
Yeah.
you could
You
win
can
it.
win that project.
You could win it.
So case by case,
Yeah.
so vertical by vertical, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, a carpet cleaning job might, your percentage is gonna be higher. But let's talk.
Depends how bad you
let's
wanna
keep-
win it too.
That's true too.
You know?
And that's why I think people like to say people are underbidding, but what's really an underbid if it's a mom and pop shop that has 4 employees, they can price it lower than us.
I don't know what your
Well, hold on.
expenses are.
It depends, right? If a mom and pop shop is underbidding you at a larger count, then you have an issue.
Okay.
And I say that because
Yeah,
a
explain
mom
that.
and pop shop is not going to be able to produce at the same level that you are. So if they're underbidding you, you have a production issue.
Okay.
That's what
That's a
I
good point. Meaning,
Some of these-
because they wouldn't
Maybe,
necessarily know that
Maybe.
big account.
Exactly.
for a bigger account though.
Because you know your production rate on the big account.
Right.
Where they're coming in to just price to win, but you should know that somewhat of the science behind it.
It depends. I mean, think about how you started out
Yeah.
in the Hummer, right?
Give it a shot, right?
Lake in the Hills, Crystal
Shot.
Lake, every day. You were doing it because it was your sole business.
Yeah.
Would you bid something the same way now that you bid?
Oh,
Right.
I've got some accounts still from back then that we literally,
Right. You don't make any money.
don't make it.
But hold on, what was the average size of those accounts?
5,000, 6,000 square feet.
See, but that's my point.
They're
right?
still small.
But that's my
They're
point,
still
right? Is that
small.
in the bigger space, you're not going to encounter that generally.
Yeah. I know we lost an account to like a mom and pop, huge facility.
Really?
I mean, sometimes it just comes down to money.
Well, no, it's interesting though.
It comes
because-
down to what they can do it for less because it might be their only account or, might be.
Well, like, let's say, so
something
let's,
like
let's
that.
throw some numbers out. Like, I'll tell you, like, we shoot for 20%. That's if I'm at 20 to 25, I can continue to grow and scale. Some I want to be at 30, some I'll go in at 10 or 15, right? But average, I'm about 20.
Okay.
Like, where would you guys be? Again, I know it's case by case, but what's a good average?
I'd say 20 to 30.
Okay.
I mean, somewhere in there, but it depends on the job,
Project base, absolutely 20, 30, 25, 30.
We'll call you the project
Yeah, I mean, we're just, yeah.
So
I mean, I
Saul,
don't
AKA
have
Project
the,
Man.
yeah, I don't, obviously big facilities like you said, I mean, margins are gonna be a little tighter, but we try to be in that.
But just because it's doesn't mean you can't go in at 10, 15%, right?
And yeah,
Coming out
sometimes
on
you will,
top,
yeah,
because there's
exactly.
other variables of why you
If
came
it's
in.
big.
If it's a big multi-site, like,
multi-square, like millions of
Yeah.
square feet.
then it's different.
Multi-site is a whole different scenario, man. Like,
Our overhead is really, I mean, compared to you, I'm sure you guys have a lot, obviously more going on, so our overhead's not as crazy as you guys, so that's why our margin's probably a little,
Yeah.
we aim for bigger, so.
And that's
He's
the-
probably at 40, 50.
Well, but that's the thing, right? So it's like if you're going after, it's almost like you're setting up a separate entity, not a separate entity, right? But it's being managed completely, right? Well, then you can go as low as 15% because it's going to be managed on its own, then,
Yeah.
right?
I think it's important to point out that markup and margin are two different things.
Yes, please,
So-
point that out.
If you're marking something up at 30%, your margin is probably only 26.
What is it, 33.3 is 20, right, or 25%? Oh, it's 25%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a good point, though. Markup is different than.
It's different.
Margin.
Yeah, it's different.
All right, so let's wrap things up, right? As far as we've got some of the takeaways, we'll highlight some of them. Juan, you did a good job at kind of really just laying it all out for everybody, right? But thank you guys, right? It's good to be back.
It's good to be back.
Somewhat, right?
It's good to be back.
Scene, look at the
Look
scene
at the
back
scenery that we got here, guys.
good to be
So let's
back.
do a cheers.
Cheers.
We're about done here, so let's go wrap up with another one. Cheers, cheers, cheers. Thank you guys. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. A lot of nuggets to learn from. We'll be highlighting some of them. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Check out the comments and the notes. We'll give some feedback like on Divi, what Saul was saying, and highlight some of the other points. So again, until next time, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
Salute.
Cheers.
All right.